All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever it is that you're watching this, guys. So, this lecture is going to deal with Unit 1, Peopling the Planet. Um, as with all of these lectures and all of these presentations, I'm going to recommend some supplemental viewing, things that you can, on your own time, go and watch to help reinforce the content, to help enrich the content. Always recommend Crash Course videos, wonderful series. You can find them on YouTube pretty easily. I also highly recommend all of the Khan Academy stuff. It's free to you as an Orange County student. You can find it through the launch page. I know a lot of you probably already use it for math, but now there's AP World History product on there too. So definitely take advantage. So we're going to get started in terms of this lecture on people on the planet with our most recognizable ancestors. This would be the hominid family. So the hominid family develops roughly about 5 to 6 million years ago. Their main attribute, which makes them our forerunners, is the fact that they are bipedal apes. Okay, these are apes that have the ability to walk on two legs, to walk on 2 feet. Um, this enables them to do a number of things, to begin using relatively crude tools. But most importantly, it enables them to move out of the African grasslands, begin to occupy new habitats, coastal regions, where they can now take advantage of resources from the ocean, things like shellfish, things like coastal birds. Now, fast forward 4 million years or so, and you get another deviation in that hominid family, and this brings us to Homo erectus. Now, Homo erectus is the first member of our genus family. Not modern humans, but essentially the closest large step towards modern humans. Larger skulls, which allows for larger brains, more capacity, more creativity, more complex thought. You also, somewhere between hominids and Homo erectus, have the development of opposable thumbs. This gives us an incredible advantage over the majority of the animal kingdom. This gives us the ability to essentially hold cylindrical objects, to be able to close our thumb into our hand and make a full scale fist. Now, even bigger than that is during the development of Homo erectus, we also begin to use fire as a tool. And I want to pause for a minute here because this is an unbelievably important development in terms of our technology. Fire has many obvious uses. Obviously, you have the light that it provides, which allows us to be more productive and more constructive at night. Also, it provides heat, which enables us to survive better during certain seasons. It enables us to expand our our habitable areas into colder environments. It also allows us to cook food. Now, taste notwithstanding, cooking food is a huge step forward to us for two reasons. One, cooked food lasts longer, gang. Put a piece of raw steak and a piece of cooked steak on the counter in your kitchen. See how long it takes before they start stinking. The cooked food is going to last longer. But cooking food also releases sugars within the food, especially in very starchy things like potato or sweet potatoes or cassava. And that gives it a higher caloric intake. So we're consuming more calories. The food is lasting longer. This is increasing our life expectancy, and it's giving us a massive advantage over the other species that we are competing with in East and South Africa. Now, Homo erectus also is the first member of our genus to develop very early stone tools. Now, these are not things that you would generally recognize as a tool, but we are talking about, shaped rocks, essentially. Things for cutting hair, things for skinning animals, things for carving meat, right? Things that are going to allow us to better manage our diet, things that are going to allow us to better maintain our way of life. Now, fast forward again, this time only 750,000 years, and you start to see the emergence of a new deviation in the hominid family, and this is us. This is anatomically modern humans, otherwise known as Homo sapiens. Again, over the 750,000 years, the skull increases. This allows, again, for more brain capacity, which again leads to more complex tools. You start to see the beginnings of fish hooks made from animal bone. This allows us to now begin to exploit the ocean as a food source. You begin to see bows and atlatls, early projectile weapons. Thanks to those opposable thumbs, now you start to see levered tools, right? These are things like axes and hammers, things that can now provide more force because rather than swinging them strictly with our arms, now we're swinging them on a fulcrum, right? Attached to a stick or some other device. And you also see the beginnings of bone tools. We start to use animal carcasses in more complex and creative ways. Now, another big change that happens during the time period between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens is that the larynx, our voice box, begins to move lower into our throats. This allows us a far wider range of sounds, more complex sounds. This increases our ability to communicate. This increases our ability to develop speech patterns, to differentiate certain words from others, and to communicate information more clearly. That obviously leads to better collaboration, better cooperation, right? More grouped activities, more and larger groups. Now, what you see here is a quick portrait of the primate group. You can see some of the earlier developments among the primates. The red dot you see there, group Hominae, these are the African apes. This is where our lineage starts to divide off from the existing ape family. All right. And then from there, you can begin to see early hominids, then Homo erectus, and then finally, a couple of million years on down the line, you see us, Homo sapiens. Now, how do we become the dominant species on the planet? Well, this mainly begins, or not mainly, it does begin with our migration out of Africa. Quick side note, all of the dates that you see here are rough estimates. They are constantly being debated. Every year, more evidence is discovered and more theories are produced in terms of how our species not only broke out of Africa, but came to dominate basically every environment on the planet. So don't get caught up too much in the minutia of these dates because they are, again, heavily debated and change regularly based on new evidence. Now, our migration out of Africa begins roughly 90 to 80,000 years ago. During this time period, small bands, small groups of Homo sapiens begin to push into the two great obstacles of Africa and the Middle East, which is namely the Sahara Desert and the Arabian Desert. These two geographic features had pretty much limited us to southern and eastern Africa for pretty much all of our existence up to this point. But with the discovery of fire, which again, we talked about how fire preserves food, it leads to higher caloric intake. We now are gradually learning how to preserve enough food and water to cross these massive geographic barriers. Also, there's evidence that we discover how to use raw salt as a preservative. Think of, the beef jerky that you would buy in Publix or Walmart. Salt dries out meat. It allows the process of rotting to slow, and generally keeps the meat not fresh, but edible for much longer periods of time. So it's during this 90 to 60,000 year period that you start to see human settlements pop up in the Middle East, in North Africa, these very early era, these very early areas of human settlement. Now, from the Middle East and North Africa, we begin to move east. Somewhere around 60,000 years ago, we begin arriving in East Asia. We begin arriving in Australia. We begin exploring the Pacific Islands. Um, this is a pretty watershed moment for us as a species because this is the first example of us using boating technology, right? Us being able to use these more complex brains, these more complex tools, this more complex system of communication to develop a way to not only cross land, but now cross water. Now, as with pretty much every environment that we move into, when humans enter these regions of the world, we quickly establish ourselves thanks to our tools, thanks to our use of fire, thanks to our more complex brains. We establish ourselves as the dominant animal. And what you see in pretty much all of these areas environmentally is large scale extinction of any big mammals in the region, also big reptiles. Essentially, what you get is the extinction of large mammals that we would use as food sources. With them dying off, you start to see the die off of large predators who prey upon them. Also, we tend to hunt down and eradicate anything that threatens our existence. So those large predators are also going to go extinct within a few thousand years of us arriving. And, this isn't something that's limited to specific regions. This is a pretty universal thing that you find when we move into a new habitat. So the map that you're looking at here gives a pretty detailed timeline of human migration, along with some other proposed routes, generally accepted routes. Again, this is prehistory. It is pre-writing and written records. There is no concrete scientific evidence as to say this was or was not the method in which human beings arrived in these areas. But again, don't get caught up in the minutia. This is, kind of a rough idea of our migration pattern out of Africa. Now, our Great Migration continues around about 50 to 45,000 years ago. You start to see humans migrating into Europe, into Northern Asia, essentially what we nowadays call Russia, and into Siberia. Again, fire plays a massive role in our ability to habitate in these areas. It allows us to adapt to colder climates. It allows us to hunt new animal species and survive in those areas. It allows us to, again, dominate the areas, even though in these new regions, we do encounter other hominid species. The most closely related to us being the Neanderthals. We coexisted with Neanderthals in Northern Asia and in Europe for roughly about 10 to 15,000 years before, competition against us or, just kind of open warfare between the two groups generally ran the Neanderthals extinct around about 10 to 15,000 years ago. Now, at the same time, while the Neanderthals are eventually being wiped out of those areas, we are continuing our migration. And around about 30 to 15,000 years ago, we begin to move into the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge. Now, during the last ice age, the water levels around the planet are much, much lower. Much of the water of the planet is frozen in the polar ice caps, which means more land is accessible. This creates a land bridge, which enables our early ancestors to move from Siberia and Northern Asia into modern day Alaska and Northern Canada. And eventually we begin to filter south um, rather quickly because there is evidence of human activity in Peru by roughly 12,000 years ago. And again, just like in East Asia, just like in Southeast Asia, just like in Central Asia, when we enter a habitat, you again see this large scale extinction of especially large mammals all throughout the Americas. This diagram gives you an idea of just some of the larger species that are known to have gone extinct upon the arrival of Homo sapiens. This includes giant sloths. This includes an American camel. This includes mastodons. Also, large scale predators, things that would have been a threat to our existence. All right, so I'm going to cut this first half of the video off here. Trying to keep these in a relatively small format, keep them down to about 10 or 12 minutes so that you have the chance to watch them and, not fall asleep to the sound of my voice. So I'm going to cut it off here. We'll pick back up in part two